Hey guys, Dr. Caleb here. Just want to quickly come in and give a quick note regarding this episode. Zach and I started this podcast without a huge idea of what we wanted to do, and thus, this episode is very different from later episodes to come. We are still finding a flow and artistic direction that works for us, but please keep that in mind. While the editing and talking points may be rough, we are having fun with it and getting better as we go. And we think it would do an injustice to erase this episode, as it'll be fun to go back and listen to it a while from now to see where we came from. Without further ado, let's get right into the episode. Hey guys, it's Dr. Caleb.
And this is Dr. Zachariah. I hope you have your security clearances in order. Otherwise, well, we're going to have to do something about that.
And this is SCPod.
And so what are we talking about today?
Today we are talking about the originator of the SCPs, 173. SCP-173 is Object Class Euclid, and its special containment procedures are as follows. SCP-173 is to be kept in a locked container at all times. When personnel must enter 173's container, no fewer than 3 may enter at any time, and the door is to be relocked behind them. At all times, 2 persons must maintain direct eye contact with 173 until all personnel have vacated and relocked the container.
Alright, so 173 is, for lack of a better word, a humanoid-shaped statue that looks like it's made of spray-painted concrete, specifically the Krylon brand. And when you're looking at it, there's really not much going on there. But if it's out of direct line of sight or anything related to that, it begins to move and only stops moving when you start looking at it again. It also oozes a reddish-brown substance, which we and some of our friends down in the labs have determined is blood and feces. It is not clear where it comes from, and to be honest, I'm not sure I want to know. And so one of the biggest hazards with this goddamn thing is that we have to clean out the cage every now and then, which, is problematic. But one of the things we also have observed is that if we stop cleaning it, it'll just keep coming, and there's really no way. I don't think there's a maximum of how much shit this thing. That's funny. How much shit this thing can actually produce. We tried moving it to another containment facility with a graded floor and like a large pit beneath it, and it just kept filling it up. And so I kind of think it wants us in there, but who knows?
It's like the anglerfish, where the light is just shit.
It's blood and shit in the amount of D-class this thing goes to, because if it doesn't see, one of the reason why it's dangerous is that not only is it kind of like a weeping angel in that it moves if you're not looking at it, if you don't look at it and it moves, its signature move is snapping your neck,
and not
just like that.
And not in a chiropractic way.
You're gone. Not in a chiropractic way. No, sirree, Bob. This thing will yeet you off your immortal coil with surprising efficiency.
Yeah, not in a chiropractic way, more in the Mortal Kombat kind of way.
Yeah, definitely. Good lord, this thing is the granddaddy of them all. It's started on a 4chan board. I think it might have been either might have been the random subreddit or the random board in 4chan.
Might have been the export, the paranormal board.
Might have been the paranormal board. It showed up with a picture, which is a very easy image to find, despite our friends in this department that scrubs information off the internet. This is the one that started it all. It showed up with a brief description of how to keep it in the box, and then what it does if it gets out of the box.
Right. And I do want to credit the original artist, Izumi Kato. He is the originator of the original SCP-173 photo. And
Mm.
I don't remember, was it 2020, 2021 that he asked that it be taken down and lose association with 173, even though, like, let's be honest, it's going to be forever associated with 173. But
Yeah, like I understand it, but it's definitely Franchacho. That's not going to happen.
right. So since then, there's been I remember when it happened, the SCP boards were actually taking submissions for a new revised version of 173. And since then, it's gone from what was commonly referred to as the peanut design
Mm.
um, to more like concrete, like metal coils, less humanoid looking, more
Mm.
eldritch horror.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Speaking for myself, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to lose the association from the original art, just because that art, it is like a hallmark of just internet creepy lore at this point. And
Yeah,
I understand the artist. I understand the feelings of the artist in that, but I think there's going to be a lot of people who agree with me on that one.
for sure.
And not to say that the new designs are bad, though. The new designs are great in their own ways. They're just not the same.
Right. When you have the original 173 for as long as we did, it really it cements, for lack of a better word, it cements itself as being the design of it. And so um it's perfectly imperfect. It's also caked up.
It's also it's dummy thick.
It's dummy thick. Um and I understand the plight of the artist as well, where like it would be totally different if it was just associated with this article. But SCP has been turned into this big brand, and there are games made about it. There are TV shows, maybe not TV shows, but there are avenues of money made off of his IP, and it doesn't come back to him whatsoever. It's not like his name is attached to it either, where like people are like, "Oh, that's really creepy. I want to go see what else
Mm-hmm.
this guy draws." It's also probably pretty creepy.
Yeah, and considering he was the first, and there was like nothing attached to this idea before that piece came along, and this in that particular case, I feel like it's more sympathetic than stuff that came later that was part of the, for lack of a better word, canon, even though there was no like actual SCP canon.
Yeah,
Um, but I don't know. For me, there's always going to be the peanut.
yeah. I mean, it is just it's so classic, um, and yeah. When was the first time that you stumbled upon this SCP?
I think this is one of the first 10 SCPs I walked into, and it would have had to been like 8, 9 years ago, I think. Um, and I think it was like because I was pretty active on the creepypasta wiki at the time,
Oh, nice.
and so this was something that came into my radar pretty quick when I started making the rounds outside of 4chan because I've made forays into the site before, but honestly, I usually get grossed out before I get anywhere deep in it. Um, which I feel like is a pretty common reaction to 4chan as a whole.
Yeah.
Uh, but I heard this thing and was like, "What the fuck's an SCP?" Which is also a pretty common reaction when you see that for the first time. And I read it and I'm like, "Oh, this is great," because I like the clinical approach to it. This very descriptive, non-flowery description of something that's kind of terrifying. And then they kept making them, and so I was like, "Well, this is great." And I don't know at what point they made the wiki, but there's now like close to 8,000 of these sons of bitches, and running just the gamut of like toaster that changes the bread type to literal god.
Yeah.
But no, I've always been like fond of like modern horror fantasy fiction. Things like because I was like a long term player of like games so like Werewolf the Apocalypse, Vampire the Masquerade, and stuff like that. And so dealing with a Men in Black situation where you're dealing with something that could go from eldritch horror to like dealing with literal fairies was something that was super appealing to me. So yeah, I think that. But yeah, the answer to your question is 173 was one of the first ones I saw, if not the first, right up there with the shy guy and the old man.
Yeah. So it sounds like you kind of stumbled upon it through the creepypasta wiki.
Oh yeah.
Okay. I definitely was introduced. 173 was definitely the first SCP I was introduced to, and it was by watching PewDiePie play Containment Breach. You know,
Mm.
um, it struck me as uniquely horrifying in a way of like just the powerlessness of like encountering something like this, and then going and doing other preliminary research, and you find out like, oh, this isn't even the highest object classification, so there are things more dangerous than this. And then you get into it, and we'll get into object classification at a later date and actually explain why, even though this thing can instantly kill you, it is not the highest object class that you can get.
In
But
the grand scheme of things, this thing is nowhere near the most dangerous thing. It likely wouldn't even be the most dangerous thing in its containment site.
oh yeah.
Because like if you look at the other things like the SCP Foundation deals with, 173 is downright tame, and I feel like a lot of that is credited due to the fact that it was the first.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it's like you look at like the reptile or the cake, and it's just like, so just don't blink. Got it.
Right.
But I mean, but even like if you can't go too far that way either, because if you look at something like Containment Breach, you understand intimately how dangerous and horrifying this thing is to deal with, because this is one of the few games I know of that actually, like, the blinking mechanic in that game is something I think about a lot.
Right.
Um, like you just have this pursuing enemy that if you close the door, it moves. If you blink, it moves. If it's too close to you and it blinks, or you close the door, you die.
Yeah, it was uniquely terrifying. And I think I stumbled. I'm not 100% sure on if I stumbled upon Weeping Angels or 173 first. But
Mm.
that it's hard to talk about one without the other, because they're both do pretty much the same thing. I actually
Yeah.
don't really know what happens with Weeping Angels. They turn you to stone, right?
I've never been much of a Whovian, but I would have to ask my sister. But they do something gnarly to you.
Yeah. It's the same concept of you look away from them and they move, and
Mm.
it's I'm pretty sure it's not as like gruesome as snapping your neck, but I think it's like they either teleport you to a different dimension or they just like turn you to stone. But anyway,
They remove you from the game.
yeah, you are disconnected. Game over. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, it's just a uniquely like looking at something is so integral to like just humanity, and same with blinking. And then you're basically told don't blink, and that is so scary because it's like asking somebody not to breathe.
Mm. Which some SCPs ask you to not do.
Exactly. And I think that's
Uh,
what SCP does really well, from the horror side of things, is they take these concepts that you really don't think about, like subconsciously you're just blinking, you're just breathing, and they're like, how about that's your weakness for this SCP?
yeah, that's a good point. Like, because of the fact that there's like nearly 8,000 of these things, um, there's an SCP that is almost guaranteed to play on something that terrifies you specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And more to the point, not all of them are entirely terrifying. Like, there's a couple of joke SCPs. There's a joke SCP, which are like, again, canon is the wrong word, but are ones that are not necessarily accepted as part of the main string of actual SCPs, and they're usually designated with like -J at the end of it. There is a joke version of 173 that like has a sombrero and just other little like nonsense things where there's a SCP tale, and tales are like short stories set in a version of the world that contains the SCP Foundation, where there is an end of the world scenario involving 173, and that it basically learns to replicate via mitosis. And
Oh
so
yeah.
you just have like exponential numbers of more and more 173s, and they just dismantle everything. Like They take down the reptile.
Right, because in that tale, I remember hearing about this one. In that tale, it's like revealed that 682, the indestructible reptile, is like the prey of whatever 173 is.
Yeah, which is, a fun take on it.
Yeah.
Once the reptile is something we're going to have to cover at a later date, just because
We want to do it justice, and it's a whole bag of worms in and of itself.
it's a whole fucking thing.
Yeah.
But no, like, and you just have these things, like, because you can't watch all of them all the time, just like taking apart the earth piece by piece until there's just nothing but sculptures of themselves, and it's great. But it really shows the range of things you can kind of expect from the SCP Wiki and Foundation, where like you can take something that is on its face and go either super silly or completely terrifying. And 173, in kind of a weird microcosm, can exemplify both.
Yeah, yeah, and it's to be said as well. Like, this is a very basic SCP. I mean, we were just talking about before we hit record. Like, it's a short article. Like, we were looking at some of the other ones, and even some of the upcoming episodes, which are like really obscure. You have to scroll. You don't have to scroll on this article whatsoever. And
No, it's
I
just
think
four paragraphs.
that's kind of the brilliance of 173. Is it's uniquely terrifying in its special way. It's simple, and it's the one that started it all. Like, literally, you wouldn't have the indestructible reptile. You wouldn't have Shy Guy. You wouldn't have the Flesh That Hates. You wouldn't have any of that without 173.
We would have the bears.
We would not have the town that got fucked by bears.
And so yeah, like what Caleb was saying was when we talked about doing this show, I said that I could not imagine a universe in which we did not start with 173, because it's the thing that started it all. It's the one thing that gave us this this property and fiction that we both adore, and it just gives us so much to talk about. And even though this is 173 is a very basic SCP as such things go, it led to so much that you can talk about almost anything and have it relate back to it. Even like thinking about Shy Guy for a second, like what a wonderful other early pairing that is, because you have one SCP that you must watch, and then you have another you can't look at or think about.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that almost, at least looking on the outside looking in, these things complement each other so well that I wonder if someone looked at the first one and looked like, okay, now what if we do the opposite?
What's the antithesis of this? Yeah.
Yeah, and so and the Shy Guy will get his own episode eventually, but no. So I have, even though it's only 4 paragraphs, SCP-173 is de facto the most important SCP, and if you're wondering why it's the first and isn't like SCP number 1, that will be its own episode.
But that's the thing as well, is I like that, like, the number really doesn't matter outside of 001's proposals.
Uh-huh.
Because you have 173, but the number really doesn't mean anything. It's a serial number that is just given to things. There are certain ones that, like, actually correspond to their number. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I've definitely seen a few that, like, their number and what they are really correspond with each other. And for being the first one, being 173, it also brings in this mystique of, like, well, if this is the 173rd one, what are the other 172? Like, there's no way this is the last one. So what are the other ones going on?
No, that's such a good point. Like, it's evocative of a greater mystery, and that's one of the best ways to get people coming back for more. And I don't know if that's what the original creator wanted when they wrote this post down on 4chan years ago. But looking back on it, because I'm a short story writer by trade, and just looking back on this, it's like it's nearly perfect in terms of just like what it could set up and what it could just go on to do and promote.
I mean, that's a really good point too, because, like, it is, this article I mean, we pretty much read it word for word, even though we tried not to. But like, it is, it gives you just enough information, but still leaves things vague enough that like your mind does the imagination of like how scary this thing is. It doesn't over
Mhm.
explain it, but it also doesn't leave you like, well, why does it do this thing?
Right, and like that's not the remit of the Foundation. The Foundation secures, contains, and protects.
Right.
And if they can find out why, they'll go for it. But there's a hundred there's a bunch of stories that cover that exact idea too. It's like why we don't know why. We're not even entirely sure why. What we care about why. It's where you put this thing in a box and make sure it doesn't fuck with anything else.
Yeah. Make sure it doesn't play with the other toys.
Right. And that is a beautiful thing to me. Like it is, and again, I don't know what the original author's intent was, but just going by what it spawned, uh, this thing was nearly perfect for the role it ended up filling in an ad hoc way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I fucking love this thing. And I could not in a million years imagine starting with anything other than this one.
Yeah, for sure. Now this is like the SCP that introduced everything and was my first
Mm.
introduction to SCP and one of your first introductions to SCP. Does it still maintain like that like favorite status? Not necessarily like your number one favorite, but like
Yeah,
is it still something that you would consider as one of your favorite SCPs?
absolutely.
Okay.
That is super easy for me just because it has a very simple gimmick, but it works.
Yeah, yeah.
Like and the containment proposed procedures they have for it makes sense. There's not a million one steps for it. They kind of understand how it works, and they kind of understand how to keep it where it is.
For sure.
Um, and it doesn't kind of go off the rails like with stuff with the Scarlet King.
Yeah, I think as somebody that really enjoys cosmic horror, um, and things of that sense, like as convoluted and everything as Scarlet King lore gets, and things like that, this is tame by comparison, and I think I will always hold respect for it for being like the first one, and like it like it's everything I've said about it so far, its simplicity and everything like that. It's amazing. I love it. It's not necessarily like if somebody were to ask me my top 10 SCPs, I don't think the sculpture would make it, but not due to it being bad, just not really my choice of SCPs.
Mm-hmm. No, the SCP universe allows for that sort of thing.
Exactly.
Like you have so many, you can like almost all of them and still have your favorites.
Oh yeah, and like there's different genres of it too. Like you have the joke ones, you have the ones that explain just everyday phenomena that occur, um, and things like that. But like, so if this is the kind of thing that appeals to you, great, and there
Mm.
is something for the horror fan and everybody.
Yeah, and you could range from your cosmic horrors to your everyday problems. Um, there are SCPs that aren't even necessarily problems. They're just because that's one of the things that's interesting to me is that SCPs could have easily just evolved into like your monsters of the week thing,
Mm-hmm.
but no, they really run the gamut from like world-ending threats to something that just helps you remember where your car keys are.
Right.
It's just like an anomaly, which is what as SCPs are also called sometimes. An anomaly could be anything that doesn't conform to normal reality or how you think it should work. There's like SCP-1000, I think, that is this orange slime that gives you hugs,
Right.
and like that is like the furthest thing from a problem.
Exactly, exactly.
Or like Dad's chicken noodle soup.
Yeah, or what's Here Be Dragons?
Here be dragons, which is just depressing.
It's
Uh,
depressing.
it's not a threat. It's just like, read this if you want to be sad.
Exactly.
And there's room for all of it, and I think that's really just the strength of it. Like, it's just this beautiful, wonderful, community-driven project that has its own life at this point, and is possibly one of the best things I think that the modern internet has given us in terms of just storytelling.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's the thing is it's written by community or what's the term? Written by council? No.
It's written by the foundation staff.
Right, right. But there's a term in writing where it's a group project, and it leads to all these different flavors. Like if you just had the one guy that wrote 173 write every single SCP, it'd get bland because I mean, you know, as a writer, you have a type of writing that you veer towards, and
Yeah.
you wouldn't get like I don't think the author of 173 could write anything about the Scarlet King because it's vastly different. 173 is perfect in the way that it's written, and if it was if SCP was just done by one person, you wouldn't have the variance that SCPs bring.
No, you're absolutely right. Just having it be this group community project allows for all these wonderful perspectives to come in and share things that are not only scary but all heartwarming, odd, strange, perturbing, and just really run the gamut. And then you not only do we have the SCPs themselves, we have the tales, which are these wonderful pieces, most of the time wonderful pieces of fiction, written as an actual short story or novella in some cases, because some of them are real fucking long. And that kind of deal with like the actual characters, because one of the other cool things about the SCP universe is that there are reoccurring characters. Like at some point, we're gonna have a special about Dr. Bright.
Oh yeah,
because he is possibly one of the favorite things about the SCP universe to me. But no, like him, Dr. Clef, and so on, and reoccurring MTFs or Mobile Task Force, which is something we'll also explain later, which are a bit for now, or to kind of give you an idea, are like they could be any. They're a group of agents that work for the Foundation that could be like a SWAT team. They could be accountants. They are teams of people meant to deal with specific problems in a specific setting. And so like you have an MTF that's geared towards finding cognito hazards in urban environments, and then you have ones that are basically dedicated monster hunters, except they're underwater, and they could be anything super specific like that. And some of them have some really fun nicknames. But yeah, God, I love SCP.
yeah. It's amazing. I do want to get back to 173 specifically, since this is what this episode is about. But before I do, I just wanted to ask you as well. Are you familiar with like backrooms?
Oh yeah, totally.
So there's been this sentiment, and I kind of agree with it, where like the backrooms lore, quote unquote, has gotten super convoluted because they keep adding levels and like just all like you can look at the first 100 levels of the backrooms and it starts to get off the rails really quickly and everything like that. And people, I've seen the sentiment that the backrooms is almost ruined because of it. Because it took almost the SCP approach where everybody's designing these levels and it's like, oh, how do you get there? And like all this other stuff when it was a very simple concept. Do you think that SCP is at all ruined by having so many of them and having so many different styles?
So commenting on both, the reason why I don't think it's a problem at all, and even the expanded quote-unquote lore of the backrooms doesn't bother me, is that, so one of the ways I run like World of Darkness, or things like Vampire the Masquerade, which are modern settings, is that I usually throw in the caveat of, the nights are long and dark and a lot of things go down. Who knows what's actually true?
Okay.
And so when it comes to stuff like this, there's no like set authority about what's true in the SCP universe.
Yeah,
There's
okay.
no set canon.
Yeah.
As much and as little of it is true as you really want there to be. And then there's a couple SCP-1 proposals that play around with that idea. So say like, you don't consider the old man a real thing. You don't consider that something in your interpretation of the universe, and that's as valid as anything else. There's no set way. There's no set continuum for you to have to prescribe to. This really is a pick and choose situation, and so you can play around with the SCPs that you like, and you can really ignore the ones you don't. It doesn't necessarily matter.
Right. And you could almost look at any given SCP as its own story, you know? It doesn't have to have anything to do... I mean, there are a few SCPs that have to do with each other, but like, for the most part, they're all self-contained.
Yeah. Maybe you think about it, and maybe you want to believe that 173 is the only one there is, and that's what it is. Like, there's just a small team of scientists that have this really weird fucking monster made of concrete and spray paint that oozes shit locked in a box somewhere, and they're just trying to deal with that, and that's it. That's as accurate as anything else.
Yeah.
And that's what you wanted to... If that's what you want to do with it, say like you want to write a story around the idea, go for it. But I mean, there's no one to enforce a strict continuity on you, and I think that is a strength and a feature and not a flaw. Simultaneously, if you want to believe that the Foundation is a massive multi-dimension spanning entity and organization that covers thousands, if not tens of thousands, of anomalous things, and all of it is true, that's just as valid.
Yeah. I think that's a good way to put it. Just like all the 001 proposals, like, there could definitely be SCPs, you know, if we're looking at this as a realistic entity. There could be SCPs that are put in there to mislead people. So if something is leaked, you know, it's like, oh, well, like, what is this one? Like, is this one real? Like, maybe this one downplays, like, the severity of the SCP situation. This one is to strike the fear into everybody, you know?
And that's, again, that's as valid as anything else, and it would be an interesting take, is definitely an interesting take on what's on there on the wiki and just floating around in general. Maybe, like, there's a SCP that deals specifically with this idea that acknowledges the fact that it's all fiction and that we're the anomaly reading it. And I love that shit. And so, yeah, that's a lot of fun. And I don't think that the fact that anyone could come in and make an SCP is a feature and not a flaw.
Yeah, no, I agree. I would not have it any other way. I wouldn't want somebody to write all of them. I wouldn't want a small council. I want the really dumb SCPs. I want the ones that people might think are terrible SCPs, because it fleshes out everything. It adds balance to this crazy world that we're jumping into. You know, you have the really scary ones that make you think about life in a certain way, and then you have the other ones that you're like, well, that's kind of dumb, but it's great that it shares the universe with the Scarlet King.
Right? Like, and I think I said this to you a lot over the course of our friendship, is that, like, I love me a fucked up little dude.
Exactly.
It's just like, I have this weird gremlin creature that, like, all it does is teleport from house to house stealing peanut butter, and that's all it does, occupying the same, you know, timeline as this, you know, lack for better words, demonic Satan King. Yeah. That will literally destroy the world when the stars are right, so to speak. And that's just great.
No, I think it's great.
And they have a foundation, quasi-governmental organization that's worried about both of them and has to deal with both ends of that spectrum. It's just hilarious to me. Like, what do you think their HR handbook looks like?
I'm pretty sure their HR is a mess just based off all the they are not OSHA compliant. Let's just put it that way.
They are. No, they are not. But no, I mean, specifically back to 173, I think I've said pretty much everything I can say about it. Like we said at the start, there's not a lot there, and what's interesting about 173, aside from its direct properties, is what it's kind of spawned.
Yeah. I think the conversation about 173 is definitely that of the Big Bang. It literally just spawned everything from it. I think that there is a lot to be said about 173, but like we said, its greatness lies in how simplistic it is. It doesn't need to explain the rules of why or how it does what it does. It just does. And
right, and it's better for it.
Exactly. Yeah, I keep drawing this memory of watching some freaking Minecraft YouTuber play an SCP mod, and he knew nothing about SCP whatsoever. And he comes across. He tried playing in hardcore. It was like one of those I survived 100 days in hardcore Minecraft in the SCP universe or whatever. And after he kept stumbling upon Shy Guy and looking at him and dying to it like 6 or 7 times in a row, he finally took it off of hardcore. But he comes across 173 and he keeps looking away and it kills him. And so finally he just boxes it in. And I was like, oh, there you go. That's exactly how the SCP Foundation took care of it too. They just boxed it in.
It works. Yeah, I love that shit so much.
Yeah, it's great. And like, you know, like we've both said multiple times, like it is uniquely terrifying in that, like, imagine the person that had to like figure out how and why it works like this. Like they just find this weird concrete dummy thick peanut, and then like he's like, wow, that's really cool. He like goes to pick a notebook up to like jot it down or pull out his phone, and he like looks down and it's gone. You know, you're dead.
Right? How many D-class and researchers had to die before they realized that?
I think 173 is definitely on the higher end of D-class personnel slain for research purposes. Not even just
because
for
it's so
research
easy.
purposes, but like, you know, I just rereading the article, like they have to clean this environment once every 2 weeks, and you have to call out like when you're about to blink so the other 2 people can keep their eyes open. You know how much concentration that takes to like, hey, I'm about to blink. Everybody okay with that? Okay, blink. Like that would be agonizing to do anything like that.
Right? It's like it's not a small space either, according to the original pictures. And so it probably takes a hot minute. And so like, you might be in there for like an hour or 2, just like trying not to blink. And oh my god, that sounds terrible.
Yeah, and that adds a little bit of horror in and of itself. Like, it's like, you know, it's November right now. I'm doing No Shit November, and like, it's a normal bodily function that I'm just kidding. I'm not doing No Shit November. But
I was along for the ride with you on that one. I'm like, okay, take it away. I'm not gonna tell you how to live your life.
But like when you're doing these regular body things, like breathing, like blinking, like pissing and shitting, like it is, when you're told not to do it, it makes it so hard to not do it.
Like, it's all you can think about.
Exactly. Like, you know, there's the whole running joke of like, oh, you forgot you needed to breathe, so get to breathing, and people are like, oh man, I really was not breathing for a second there, and it's because like you don't focus on it and you don't do it. But when you're told like, if you blink, you're going to die, and you just like feel your eyes slowly drying out, and you're like, I'm going to die.
Right? Like, how much do you trust your coworkers?
Exactly. Especially like, and that's another whole thing, and we'll get into what D-class personnel are and everything like that. But like, for the long and short of it, like, these are prison inmates. These are like a lot of, I mean, there are some good D-class personnel and everything like that, but they're really just like bullet sponges. And
Oh yeah.
So you're put into this cage with this eldritch monstrosity that will snap your neck if nobody's looking at it, with two other criminals, and you're just supposed to trust that they're going to call out when they blink.
Right? And they have to trust that you're going to call out when you blink.
Exactly. Like,
God.
Like putting yourself in the space of a D-class personnel, and we'll get to some SCPs with stories, and like you get to kind of put yourself in the shoes of a D-class personnel, but like, oh my god, is it terrifying? Like thinking about like the stairwell or something like that, where you're just told you have to start descending this staircase. It's
descend the staircase.
Yeah,
I'll tell you what we're looking for.
Exactly, and like you're just like, if you're a D-class personnel at the SCP Foundation, you're pretty. It's worse than a death sentence.
Yeah, it is a death sentence, just with other things.
Except you don't get a last meal, and it's probably going to be scarier.
It's a choose your own. It's a choose your own death sentence.
Yeah, exactly.
God.
Yeah. I don't really got too much more about 173. Like we said, its majesty comes in simplicity, and it really is just a talking point for the greater good of the SCP universe and everything like that.
We had to start somewhere.
Yeah, and why not start with the one that started it all?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Are there any other stories that you can think of with it, or?
Oh, there's definitely probably more out there. I just can't think of any more. If anyone listening to this wants to learn more, I really recommend going to the SCP Wiki. Just literally search SCP Wiki. You will find it.
It'll also I'll also link the web URL in the show description.
That's good wisdom. Yeah, because that's basically what we're going to be sourcing everything out of. And I would encourage anyone to just check it out. Go to the Tales section. Go down any of the generations of the SCP lists. And it's a good time.
Yeah, and we'll definitely be covering Tales and everything on here as well. We'll probably dedicate some special episodes to some good ones. And everything like that. But really, we're using the articles as jumping off points to be two idiots talking about some spooky things that we like.
Yeah. So for next time, I'm thinking we go with the cake.
Yeah. Let's do it.
All right. Also the other thing if you want to read along with us, feel free to do so. Go to the wiki and look up SCP-871, the self-replicating cake, and that's what we'll be covering next time. In the meantime, make sure your security credentials are up to date. Otherwise, we'll have to do something about that, won't we?
Exactly. And in the meantime, you can find the podcast on Twitter or X and Instagram at SCPod.cast. And Herr Dr. Zach, where can they find you?
They can find me at www.makeawritingcheck.blogspot.com.
Cool. And definitely check that out. It's a really great the author of that website. I don't know what he's doing to keep pumping out great content, but if you like SCPs, you're gonna like what he does. I'm just gonna put it out there. And
he drinks. That's what he does.
And you can also find me at Calica1738 on Twitter and Instagram, and sometimes I stream as well. So yeah, we'll be covering SCP-871 next time. Feel free to read it beforehand, and we'll see you next time with some more spooky stuff going on.
Take care out there.